friends. Yes, it's me, Mike May, and I'm back again with another episode of the Suburban Hollywood Dude podcast. Um, Happy Father's Day to everyone out there. This is actually the day after Father's Day that I'm recording this, and I thought I would take a little time to talk about my dad. A lot of people knew my dad, a lot of people worked with him, and a lot of people had heard of him. He had sort of gained this legendary status because of his use of a chainsaw while doing his craft. For those of you that didn't know what he did, he was a key grip in the business. And people ask all the time, what's a key grip? I think people know more now about what a key grip does than they did years ago. But that being said, I'll give you the quick brief. Key grip's sort of like the penultimate handyman on the set. Specifically, handyman with anything to do with the camera, moving the camera, putting the camera on cranes, putting it in spots, mounting it, etc. But they're also key grips are also responsible for helping cut the light when lighting scenes and, taking light away where we don't want it, things like that. And, they kind of help out every department in a lot of ways. They move sets, they take walls out, which leads me to what my dad was famous for, which was he was known for using his chainsaw to take stuff out that happened to be where the director wanted the camera. Some of it's been embellished over the years, but he actually happened to be really talented with his chainsaw and cutting walls out that were built by the show itself, by the production designer. A lot of the sets that are built, my friends in the business know this, have wild walls. But there's also walls on sets that are built that aren't built as wild walls. Wild walls meaning they're specifically made to be taken out if you want to put the camera there. Inevitably, on any show you ever work on, there's always that time and a place where, whether it's the director or the director of photography, that they want to put the camera in a spot that maybe doesn't have a wild wall. So what do? Well, you call Tommy May. My dad would come in with his chainsaw, make some very specific cuts to the wall, and remove it. A lot of the stories over the years has evolved into him cutting national monuments down and whatever it may be. There might be some truth to that. I'm going to leave it at that, keep the legend alive. But more importantly, I wanted to talk about my dad and his life and, where he started out and his path. Because frankly, it's an interesting story. He was born in Hollywood. He had two older brothers. His oldest brother, Harry, who was a director of photography, my cousin Bradford's dad. And then they had a brother named Jimmy. Jimmy May was a roofer. And actually, all three of my dad and his two brothers, all three of the boys, I should say, were actually roofers as well. And my Uncle Harry, before he got in the business, was a roofer with my Uncle Jim. And they were probably like maybe 8 years older, 5 years older than my dad, or give or take, I can't remember. But when my dad was in high school, my uncles would be driving to work as roofers, and when they needed an extra guy, they would kidnap my dad as he was walking to school and make him go to work with him. So that's one little interesting tidbit of the May family. But going back, my dad was born in Hollywood at what was it? I can't remember the name of the hospital, but he went to grade school at Blessed Sacrament Grade School, which is right on Hollywood Boulevard. And he actually went to grade school with a very famous guy, stuntman, legendary, that most of you may have heard of, Gene LaBelle, who just recently passed away, God bless his soul. But Gino and my dad knew each other since grade school, since like first grade. And as my dad went through his schooling, he ended up at Hollywood High School. He went there, for high school, and some of the people that were in his class at Hollywood High School were like Carol Burnett and a couple other people I can't remember. But when he got out of high school, he went to junior college at Glendale Junior College, and he learned how to fly. He wanted to learn how to fly. He didn't want to be a pilot necessarily, but he loved flying. And he started taking flying lessons when he was at Glendale Junior College. And that sort of started his love affair with flying that we'll get into later. But ultimately, because my grandfather was in the business, who was a grip, and then my Uncle Harry had gotten the business as a grip. My Uncle Jim stayed as a roofer. My dad obviously wanted to get a little career going, so he got a job working at Warner Brothers back in, I think, 1955. And back then, they still have them, but not in the same way they had them then. But my dad used to drive a stage crane. And the stage crane was basically a crane that would pick up sets and walls, and they'd drive it from stage to stage or put it on the back lot or bring it from the back lot to use on whatever specific day of shooting was. So after doing that for a couple of years, he wanted to segue into just being a grip, initially being a grip. So he got that opportunity and he became a grip. He was no longer a stage crane driver, but he was a grip. And it was on a film called The Greatest Story Ever Told, the story of Jesus. And it was directed by a very famous director named George Stevens. George Stevens did Giant and some other ones I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was on that film that I was born. And not that I had anything to do with it at that point, but my dad was shooting that movie in, I think it was Kanab, Utah. And my mom was getting ready to have me. She had to call the production office. They had to have a guy drive all the way from the production office to the set, which was like an hour drive, just to get to the set and tell my dad that my mom was getting ready to give birth to me. And needless to say, the director, George Stevens, said to my dad and said to production, let my driver take Tommy to the airport. So George Stevens, the director, let his driver drive my dad to the airport, and he made it back in time for me to be born. Here I am. But as his career went on, he got his first key grip job on a TV show, very well known back in the day, called Get Smart. And Get Smart was his first real key grip job, which he loved. He holds that show and held that show in very high regard because it was with Don Adams, and Mel Brooks was the writer-producer on it, and Buck Henry and all these great people. And he loved working on that show, and he loved being part of it. And that sort of was the beginning of his key grip career. And ultimately, he started doing movies. And one of the first movies that he did, big movies that he did as a key grip, was a movie called Paint Your Wagon. It was big, if you didn't know what it was, a lot of people do. It was kind of a box office failure, but it was interesting nonetheless in that it was Lee Marvin, Clint Eastwood, a woman named Jean Seberg, and it was this huge musical that was based on the California Gold Rush, but they shot it in Oregon, in Baker, Oregon. And it also happened to be the first location that I went on as a kid with my family, because my dad was going to be gone for like 4 or 5 months. And it also started the relationship with another famous behind-the-scenes person named Tommy Shaw. Tommy Shaw was a very famous first assistant director who worked with John Huston a lot on a lot of stuff. And then Tommy became a production manager. And that started a relationship literally with Tommy Shaw. It must have went for probably, I think, 30 years maybe, off and on. Tommy always hired my dad, and we all, as a kid, Tommy has a whole bunch of kids in his family, and with myself and my sisters, we all as kids would hang out on the set together, and I can't remember how many locations we did with the Shaws and Tommy, but it was a really memorable experience. But one of the funny elements within that was actually before Paint Your Wagon was a lot of people that know me and knew my dad knew that we always had Great Danes, Great Dane dogs growing up. And the first Great Dane that we ever got was one named Samson. And Samson came about from my dad working on it was a TV show about circus performers, whatever, but it was with Jack Palance. And I can't remember the name of it, so forgive me. But Jack Palance had gotten a Great Dane. And he brought it home, and his wife said, "What are you doing with that? We're not keeping that dog. Get rid of him." So Jack Palance came to work the next day and said, "Hey, does anybody want my dog? I can't keep it. My wife won't let me keep it." And my dad said, "Sure, I'll take it." And that was the first Great Dane that we ever got, Samson. He was a lovely dog, big, fawn, super sweet, loved to swim. And we literally had, I think it was probably about 10 Great Danes over the years. And the last one that my parents had, right before they passed away, ended up coming with me, Bonzo. Some of you may have seen pictures of him. But there were times where we had 2 Great Danes, sometimes 3. Great dogs, the best. Obviously, they eat a lot and they do other things a lot. But that was one of the things in my life growing up. I didn't even know, oh yeah, we got a Great Dane. I didn't think anything about it because we always had one. You don't realize how not a lot of people had Great Danes, let's put it that way. But anyway, as far as my dad's career went, his first big key grip job was Paint Your Wagon, as I said. And then he ended up doing another film not long after that called Monty Walsh, which once again was with Lee Marvin and actually Jack Palance again. And we were in Tucson, Arizona, old Tucson, which was another fun location that I remember very well, and hanging out with other kids that I ended up growing up with and working with in the business. And then after that, I think the next location was my dad got a job going to Hawaii. He said, "All right, we're going to Hawaii, everybody, for the summer." I was like, wow, fantastic. I think it was probably 7 or something like that. Well, the movie that he got, which is pretty amazing when you see it and think about it, was called Rainbow Bridge with Jimi Hendrix. And my dad, needless to say, was not into rock and roll, and certainly in 1970, he was not into the Jimi Hendrix style of rock and roll. But took the family, we went to Maui. We stayed there I think we were there for a couple months. And he did this rock concert / documentary with Jimi Hendrix, which one of the storylines was they were going to go to the top of the Haleakala crater at some point and sit up there and wait for aliens to land and take them away, which was sort of similar to the Shirley MacLaine story, but that didn't happen either in terms of the aliens coming down. But it was a great experience, obviously being there. We had an apartment that was like a block, not even a block from the beach, maybe 100 yards. And every day I went to the beach every day and hung out and, no supervision. It was great. Good times. And then I think after that, we ended up doing, what was it? He did a movie called Cinderella Liberty, which is a really beautiful film starring James Caan. Vilmos Zsigmond was the director of photography. Nick McLean was a camera operator. Cal Roberts was the focus puller. And Mark Rydell was a director. And it was another summer vacation in on a location somewhere that I've never been, obviously. It was Seattle, Washington. And my dad had rented a house right on the lake, Lake Washington in Seattle. And it was amazing. We had this really cool house on this big grassy lot with a little dock. And it was right in it was Juanita Bay, if I remember correctly. And we had a little boat out there, and I think I was 10. And at one point I took the boat out with my friend and ran out of gas in the middle of the bay there. And my dad had worked all night, and they found out that I was out there in the boat out of gas, and one of the neighbors had to come and save me. And needless to say, I got in a lot of trouble for that, but great memories. And I worked as an extra on that with my sisters, and it was fun, really super fun. Anyway, and then I think after that he did a film with another very famous director named Richard Brooks, who wrote and directed a Western called Bite the Bullet. Bite the Bullet's a fantastic Western. It was with Gene Hackman, James Coburn, Candice Bergen, Jan Michael Vincent, and we ended up in Chama, New Mexico. which was another beautiful location, kind of out in the middle of nowhere at that time, but another great location, another beautiful movie. Harry Stradling was the director of photography on it. 1974, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think my last location that I remember before I got into high school was a film called Convoy that Sam Peckinpah directed. It was an interesting location because it was 1977 and I was just getting into high school. Everybody was a little crazy. There was a lot of people partying. I ended up being one of them at 14, 15, whatever I was. But it was an amazing group. It was Sam Peckinpah, Chris Christopherson, Ali McGraw, Burt Young, and all the people that Sam Peckinpah had on every show with him. He always used the same people. And, everybody stayed at the same hotel, as many of you know how that worked out. We were in Albuquerque and Santa Fe and all that kind of stuff. And, it was kind of a free-for-all, I'd say, a little bit. Sam was a little crazy and that sort of thing. But it was great to be part of it. I worked on that a lot as sort of a production assistant and as a grip, and I helped the prop guys out. Once again, Tommy Shaw was on that, and a lot of the Shaw family were on that. And then I got into high school, and I didn't really go on location again with my dad after that until I got in the business. But my dad ended up, after doing that film, he hooked up with a great, talented director cinematographer named Peter Hyams. And Peter was just a lovely, lovely man. And my dad always held him in high regard, as did I, because I ended up working with Peter years later. But my dad kind of went back and forth at that point between Peter Hyams and Blake Edwards. Blake Edwards, famous director of the Pink Panther movies and 10 and Victor Victoria. And the ones that my dad did with Blake were SOB, if you know that movie, Standard Operational Bullshit, which was the making of a movie starring his wife, Julie Andrews, and some other great actors, comedic actors. And in the midst of that, my dad also did a movie with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon called Buddy Buddy, directed by Billy Wilder. And although there was no locations that I went with my dad on that, I did go down to the set and visit and get to meet Billy Wilder and hang out with him. It was amazing to, kind of have some dialogue with him because he was funny as hell. But in his time with Peter Hyams, he did a great movie, I think it was 1980, called Star Chamber, Michael Douglas. It's a really great film if you haven't checked it out. And then not long after that, they did 2010, which was a sequel to 2001, Space Odyssey, with Roy Scheider and Helen Mirren. Great movie. And, he bounced back and forth between Blake Edwards and Peter at that time. And I think with Blake, he did Blind Date, SOB, a movie called The Fine Mess with Ted Danson and Howie Mandel that I worked on as a production assistant as well, like 1984. And, he had this great run. He didn't do like these big, great commercial success movies a lot of the times. But, when you get with good people and, it's that group, you stick with them. If they call, you go with them. You don't go into any project going, oh, this one's going to make a lot of money and I'll get really well known by doing this. You just do it. And that's what my dad did. And near the end of his career, actually, I take it back. One of the last movies that he did with Peter Hyams, actually, he did two more after that. I beg your pardon. But we did a movie called The Presidio. My dad, Peter Hyams. I was a second assistant on it. And, Peter was, I loved working with him because he was the director of photography as well as the director. And, when you dealt with, having to get stuff done, you only had to talk to one guy. It was between Peter and himself. And it was a great group. Everybody was really tight in the Peter Hyams group. Peter actually also produced the film Monster Squad that my cousin Bradford was a director of photography on, and my dad was a key grip on it. And that was another great group of people. Neil Mackless was a production manager. So many good people over the years. And I feel very fortunate I was part of that group for the amount of time that I was. But my dad ended up doing a couple more movies with Peter, Narrow Margin, and another one I can't remember. But he loved Peter very much, and there was mutual respect. And, I think back to, there's a lot of people loved my dad as a professional. And the reason that people loved him was because he was the penultimate professional. He would, where do you want the camera? Okay, great. I'll make it happen. He never said, I couldn't do it. He never said, I won't do it. The only time he ever said he won't do it was when it wasn't safe. And if that was the case, he would do whatever it took to make it safe so that you could do the shot. He was a very safety conscious guy. On more than one occasion on the set, he saved people's lives by virtue of an accident happening and him getting there and, providing, medical aid. Not that he was any kind of paramedic or anything, but he knew enough to help, whatever it was. And one instance was on the film Blind Date that Blake Edwards was the director on and Harry Stradling was the DP. It was a film with Bruce Willis and Kim Basinger. And at the end of the movie, it was a scene where Kim Basinger jumps into a swimming pool and she happened to be wearing a wedding gown. And it was the last shot of the show, and it was a great shot, and everybody's clapping. Oh my gosh, it's a great shot. And my dad happened to notice that Kim Basinger was still in the pool, and the weight of the wedding dress in the water was holding her underwater, and she couldn't swim up. And my dad dove into the pool and basically saved her, pulled her out of the water, because everyone was kind of like, oh, she'll be all right. She can swim to the shore. But she couldn't, or swim to the side of the pool. Which there's a quick little story from my part on that. I was doing a second unit on a film called The Getaway, the remake of The Getaway with Alec Baldwin, and when he was married to Kim Basinger at the time. And so there was a day on the set, we were in Prescott, Arizona, and I wanted to introduce myself to Kim because I was talking to my dad. He goes, oh, say hi to Kim, because he had known her for years. And so I introduced myself to her, and she was standing next to Alec Baldwin, and he kind of had a look on his face that I was coming over to talk to her. I said, hey, Kim, my name's Mike May. My dad's Tommy May. He wanted me to send my best to you. And she said, oh my God, how's your dad? The whole thing. And she turns to Alec Baldwin and says, sweetheart, this is Mike May. His dad, Tommy May, is a key grip. He saved my life on Blind Date. And she proceeded to tell him the story. And then he was like, oh, good. You saved my wife, or your dad saved my wife. But my dad was just always like that. He was very safety conscious and, always had a great peripheral view of everything that was happening, and whatever didn't look right, he saw that, and he did what he could to make sure it was safe. He was very safety conscious like that. And, and he was more than willing to help everybody. There was always a little bit of a gruff response if you were a rookie. I mean, I remember doing some of my first shows in the business with my dad, and I, we never called our dads. Anybody that was in the business didn't call their dad, because there was a lot of kids on the show whose dads were their dads. So we called them by their first name, and I'd say, hey, Tommy, can I get an apple box? And he'd say, I'll tell you when you get an apple box. He was gruff, but eventually he'd give me an apple box. But I look back at his career, and a lot of these photos up behind me are mostly his, because when my mom and dad passed away, he had all these photos, and I ended up getting them, and I didn't know. I was like, what am I going to do with these things? So I put them up. But if you look back there's one of the films he did with Peter Hyams was a movie called Running Scared as well, in Chicago, with Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines, and I ended up working on that as a stunt guy, believe it or not, and great time. And there was also a photo back there of my dad and William Holden from SOB, Jack Lemmon from Buddy Buddy, and like I said before, when you get in this business, you don't get into go, I want to work with big stars. Maybe some people do. Never my dad's thing, and mine neither, obviously. But you answer the phone, you take a job, you don't know where it's going when the phone first rings, and you go off on an adventure that is, they're never the same. You could have the same people, but it's always a different adventure. And I think my dad kind of worked in, there's several different golden ages of Hollywood. There was like the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, but the 60s and 70s were a different kind of golden age. It was a golden age of independent films that came about. And, my dad did a lot of those as well. He did another movie with Vilmo Sigmund as the director of photography called Scarecrow with Al Pacino and Gene Hackman. And I think Al Pacino had been asked, what's your favorite film that you've ever done? And he would mention Scarecrow as one of his favorite movies. It's a little independent, where there were a couple of bums, riding trains through, Nevada and getting into trouble. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it. But, my dad did that one. He did a movie called Electroglide in Blue with Robert Blake. There was another interesting independent shot by Conrad Hall. A bunch of other I can't remember off the top of my head. But he did a movie called Tequila Sunrise with Conrad Hall as well, that I was fortunate to work on with Tommy Shaw, of course. So, there's a through line through a lot of our lives, of those of us in the business of, every show you work on, there's at least, at minimum, 50 people. In those days, 50 people, I say, but maximum, it could be up to 500 people, depending on what it is. The core group, there's maybe 100 people, 75 people. And, every show you do, you do your best to get everyone's name. And my dad remembered everyone's name. He was that guy. And I learned that from him and my cousin Brad as well. But you also forge friendships, and you're in the trenches of these, battles of these movies and all that kind of stuff. And, a lot of the people that were young that worked with my dad are people that I ended up working with in my career. And, and even though I'm a few years in, I can look back at my career. I didn't do the biggest movies. I didn't, there's a lot of stuff I didn't do. But you know what? I have no regrets. I was fortunate to do what I did do and work who I've worked with. And so many of them are friends out there that I love seeing the comments from everyone talking about my dad. And so needless to say, on this post-Father's Day Suburban Hollywood Dude podcast, big homage to all the dads in the business out there. It's a tough thing working in this business and having kids because you're not around. My dad wasn't around for many, many years, and he made up for it by being a good dad, by taking care of us, and whenever he could, he'd bring us on location with him. And I tried to do the same thing in my career with my kids, and I know everyone else has as well. And you give up a lot in the movie business, but there's a lot to be gained. And thinking back to my dad's career, he cherished the people that he worked with, and it made him who he was. So anyway, this might be a little shorter than usual, but thank you all for checking in again. I'll be doing another one real soon, and hope everyone has a great week. And I'll see you on the next Suburban Hollywood Dudes podcast. Please give me a like and a subscribe, and we'll keep it going. All right? God bless.